sits in 90% of our kitchens, a silent humming box of convenience. But this isn't just an appliance. It is a relic of a global war, a masterpiece of physics, and the result of a total accident involving a melted candy bar. Today we go inside the waves, from the secret laboratories of World War II to the digital hearth of the modern home. This is the incredible 80-year journey of the microwave oven. The story of the microwave oven does not begin in a kitchen. It begins in a world that has not yet learned how to be afraid of the invisible. It begins before the smooth hum of a countertop box became background noise, before the soft glow of a digital clock became the heartbeat of late-night snacking, before a child could safely heat a meal without touching a flame. It begins in the late 1930s, when nations were building machines not to comfort people, but to find and destroy them. In that era, the most important battles were already shifting away from what the eye could see. The airplane had made borders porous. A country could be punished from the air in minutes, and for an island nation like Britain, the threat was existential. German bombers did not need to occupy the land to devastate it. They only needed to arrive unseen, in darkness and cloud and distance, and turn cities into rubble before defenses could react. To survive, Britain needed warning, not rumor, not scouts, not luck. It needed early detection. It needed to see beyond the horizon. Radar was the promise of that vision. A system that could send out radio waves, measure their echoes, and translate those echoes into information about objects in the sky. The principle was elegant. The early reality was clumsy. Early radar operated at long wavelengths. Those waves traveled well, but they were blunt. They could hint that something was coming, but they struggled with detail. Was it one plane or a formation? Was it high or low? How fast? From what exact direction? And the equipment itself betrayed its limitations. Long wavelengths demanded long antennas, towers of metal, and arrays stretched across fields, fixed and conspicuous, difficult to move, easy to target. Scientists knew what better radar would require: shorter wavelengths, higher frequency, microwaves. With microwaves, radar could sharpen into something like precision. It could distinguish objects that were close together. It could measure angles more accurately. It could guide weapons rather than simply warn of danger. It could become not just an alarm, but an instrument. But microwaves demanded a power source that did not exist. The vacuum tubes of the day could not generate high-power microwaves efficiently. Pushed them too hard and they overheated and failed. In a sense, the problem was not simply scientific. It was material. It was engineering. It was a question of what copper, glass, and metal could withstand. The war demanded a machine that could operate at frequencies the world had barely mastered, at power levels that would destroy most devices built for radios and early electronics. That is where the Magnetron enters the story, not as a kitchen part, but as a wartime heart. The Magnetron had been conceived earlier in various forms, but it had not yet become the compact powerhouse that microwaves required. The breakthrough came in a place that does not fit the myth of glamorous science. A basement laboratory at the University of Birmingham in the winter of 1939, cold enough that hands would ache, crowded with instruments and wires and the heavy feeling of urgency that comes when people realize their work may determine whether their cities survive. Two physicists, John Randall and Harry Boot, were tasked with closing the power gap. Their approach was direct and audacious. They took a block of copper and machined cavities into it with painstaking precision, arranging those cavities around a central hole. It is easy to romanticize this moment as a flash of genius, but what it really was a blend of theory and stubborn craftsmanship. The geometry mattered, the smoothness mattered, the tolerances mattered. At microwave frequencies, small imperfections are not small. They become inefficiencies. They become heat. They become failure. The cavity magnetron worked through a controlled dance of electrons. A cathode in the center emitted electrons. A magnetic field forced those electrons into curved paths, causing them to whirl around rather than fly straight. As they passed the openings of the cavities, they induced oscillations. Each cavity acted like a resonant chamber, like a musical instrument tuned not to sound but to electromagnetic frequency. The result was a self-sustaining microwave oscillation that could be extracted as usable power. When Randall and Boot first tested their prototype, the output was astonishing. Hundreds of watts where previously there were only a few, then thousands. Within weeks, they were pushing toward 10 kilowatts. It was not just that they had made microwaves. They had made microwaves practical. They had made them portable. A device no larger than a grapefruit could do what earlier equipment could barely do with cabinets and racks and fragile assembly. For the British, this was more than a technical triumph. It was strategic leverage. A radar system using microwaves could fit on aircraft, on ships, on smaller platforms. It could spot a submarine periscope, track a bomber at night, measure precise angles, and offer the kind of tactical information that turns chaos into coordinated defense. In an era where a few minutes could determine whether a city slept or burned, precision mattered. But Britain faced the harsh reality that invention is not victory unless it can be produced. In 1940, Britain was under direct assault. Factories were bombed. Resources were strained. Even if they had the secret, scaling it to mass production under siege was a cruel gamble. And so Britain did something historically rare and psychologically difficult. It shared its most vital secret. The Tizard mission was born from desperation and trust. A small group of British scientists, led by Sir Henry Tizard, carried a collection of advanced technologies to the United States. It was a handoff of the future, packed into a trunk. Inside were blueprints and prototypes, including the cavity magnetron, the beating heart of microwave radar. They crossed the Atlantic with the knowledge that German submarines hunted those waters. The risk was not merely personal. If the trunk sank, the advantage might sink with it. When the Americans saw the magnetron, the reaction was not polite appreciation. It was disbelief. American labs had pursued microwave power, but they had not achieved anything like this compact output. The magnetron did not just offer a tool. It forced a shift in priorities. The United States, with its vast industrial capacity, could mass-produce what Britain could not. The alliance was no longer just military, it was technological. And at the center of that new relationship was an institution that became legendary. The radiation laboratory at MIT, the Rad Lab. The Rad Lab. The Rad Lab turned radar development into an industrial-scale scientific project. It attracted talent, money, urgency. It produced designs, components, training, and new methods. It became a factory of ideas where the line between pure science and wartime engineering blurred. Companies across America became part of this effort, and among them was Raytheon, a firm that would become inseparable from the microwave story. Raytheon was not yet the household name it would become. It was an electronics company with expertise in vacuum tubes and radio components. During the war, it scaled up rapidly, producing magnetrons in huge numbers. That scaling was not automatic. The magnetron was a complicated device. Its cavities needed precise shaping. Its materials needed consistency. Its assembly had to handle high voltages and intense heat. Turning a university basement prototype into a mass-manufactured component required a kind of genius that is often undervalued: process genius. That is where Percy Spencer enters. Spencer's biography is often told as a parable of American self-invention, and it deserves that attention, not because it's sentimental, but because it explains how he thought. He was born in 1894 in Howland, Maine, in a world where electricity was still a novelty in many places. His father died when he was an infant. His mother abandoned him. He was raised by relatives, and when those relatives died, he became responsible for supporting the household. He left school early and went to work in a spool mill, surrounded by machines whose logic he could sense even if he could not name it. Spencer's education was not formal, but it was intense. When a local paper mill installed electric lighting, he volunteered to help, teaching himself wiring and circuits by hands-on experience. In the Navy, he became fascinated by wireless telegraphy. He read textbooks at sea, learning mathematics and physics, not for grades, but for survival of curiosity. He taught himself trigonometry, calculus, and metallurgy. He built an internal model of how electrons moved through tubes, how heat traveled through metals, how resonance behaved. He did not learn in compartments. He learned in systems. At Raytheon, Spencer's talent was exactly what wartime production needed. The magnetron was a delicate instrument that had to operate at power levels that wanted to tear it apart. Spencer improved manufacturing methods, including a punch and stack approach that made cavity production faster and more repeatable. Under his influence, Raytheon became one of the world's leading magnetron producers. By some accounts, Raytheon produced the majority of the magnetrons used by the Allies. Spencer was not just a contributor. He was a multiple. And then the war ended, and the story pivoted, not gently, but abruptly. Wartime industries face a cliff when conflict stops. Contracts vanish. The moral urgency that drives budgets dissolves. Companies that grew fat on government demand must either shrink or find a new market. The post-war era is often described in terms of peace and prosperity, but for the military-industrial complex, it was also panic. A company like Raytheon needed a future that did not involve constant war. Percy Spencer's famous moment, the melted candy bar, is often told as a charming accident. It was, but it was also something else. It was the collision of two worlds, a weapon of detection interacting with something human, ordinary, edible. Spencer was standing near an active magnetron, one emitting microwaves into a test rig. He felt warmth in his pocket. He reached in and found a candy bar, a peanut cluster, or a similar chocolate and nut bar, depending on the account, reduced to a sticky mat. In that moment, Spencer did what inventors do. He treated the inconvenience as data. The room was cool. The bar had been in his pocket for some time without melting. Body heat could not explain it. The only new variable was the magnetron's microwaves. That meant the microwaves were interacting with the candy bar's molecules. Are a form of electromagnetic radiation, but unlike X-rays, they are non-ionizing. They do not carry enough energy per photon to strip electrons from atoms. Instead, they couple primarily with polar molecules, especially water, causing them to rotate in response to the oscillating electric field. That rotation and friction becomes heat. Fats and sugars also respond, though less strongly than water. In the candy bar, microwaves were finding moisture and fat, exciting them, and producing heat from the inside. Spencer did not just theorize, he tested. Popcorn was a natural choice because it is a sealed system that reveals internal heating dramatically. He placed kernels near the magnetron and they popped. The lab filled with the sharp percussion of expanding starch. Scientists who spent years thinking about waves bouncing off aircraft suddenly watched waves cook food in seconds. It was both ridiculous and profound. Then Spencer tried an egg. He placed it in a container and directed microwaves into it. The egg exploded because internal steam pressure rose faster than it could escape. It was a perfect demonstration of microwave heating, not surface browning, not slow conduction from outside in, but volumetric heating, energy delivered throughout the food at once, limited by penetration depth and composition. Raytheon filed a patent in October 1945 for a method of treating foodstuffs using electromagnetic energy in the microwave range. The language was dry. It described frequencies in megacycles, the old term, and it described heating effects. But behind that technical phrasing was a startling possibility. A radar component could become a cooking device. That possibility created a problem that was both engineering and cultural. Engineering because magnetrons built for radar were not designed for kitchens. Cultural because the microwave was born from war and radiated an aura of danger, especially in an age newly traumatized by atomic weapons. Raytheon's first microwave ovens were industrial beasts. In 1947, the company introduced the Radarange, a name that itself reveals the transitional identity of the machine. It tied the new product to radar, a word that still carried wartime authority and technological glamour. The early Radarange units were huge, nearly 6 feet tall, with heavy steel enclosures. They weighed hundreds of pounds, some accounts placing them around 700 pounds. They required water cooling. If you wanted one, you did not just need an outlet. You needed plumbing and drainage. You needed infrastructure. The price reflected that. Around $3,000, which in the late 1940s was an enormous sum. More than many cars, more than many families could spend on all appliances combined. Raytheon did not sell these to households. It sold them to institutions where speed had economic value and where installation was feasible. Ships, especially ocean liners, where kitchens had staff and equipment, and the cost could be justified as a competitive advantage. Hospitals where reheating meals quickly and safely mattered. Railways. Restaurants that wanted to experiment with novelty. In those early contexts, the microwave was less a cooking device than a reheating device. It excelled at heating liquids and leftovers. It could warm soups and sauces quickly. But it revealed a limitation that would haunt it for decades. It did not brown food. The Maillard reaction, the chemical process that creates complex flavors and browned crusts when proteins and sugars react at high temperatures, requires surface dryness and high heat. Traditional ovens and stovetops produce dry heat and radiant energy that raise surface temperatures above the boiling point of water. Microwaves, by contrast, couple strongly with water and heat food by exciting molecules, often keeping surface temperatures near the boiling point unless moisture can escape. The result is food that is hot but pale, meat that looks boiled, bread that turns rubbery, texture that feels wrong even if the internal temperature is correct. Chefs and diners reacted with ambivalence. They were impressed by speed. They were disappointed by aesthetics and flavor. The microwave seemed like a machine that could do one thing exceptionally, but could not replicate the sensory cues that people associated with cooking. And then there was fear. The word radiation was not a neutral word in 1950. It was a word associated with death. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not distant abstractions. They were fresh horrors. The public had learned that invisible energy could burn flesh and poison landscapes. Now companies were asking them to bring a radiation box into their home and cook food inside it. Raytheon's marketing teams understood that language mattered. They tried to avoid the word radiation, emphasizing radar waves, high-frequency energy, electromagnetic cooking. They used demonstrations to prove safety. A common stunt involved placing a fluorescent light bulb inside the oven cavity. The bulb would glow from the microwave field, a visual proof of invisible energy. It was both impressive and unsettling, like a magic trick that reminded you the magic was real. To build trust, the industry used home economists, a profession that carried authority in mid-century America. These women traveled with demonstration units, showing audiences how quickly food could be heated and tasting the results in front of them. There was the performance element. The demonstrator had to act as if the machine was not frightening, as if this was simply the next rational step in modern life. The underlying message was not just that the microwave was safe, but that a modern household should not be afraid of science. Yet the domestic breakthrough did not come in the 1950s. The microwave lingered at the edges, useful in institutions, exotic in upscale contexts, and still too expensive, too large, and too strange for most homes. The technology needed miniaturization, cost reduction, and a cultural repositioning. That transformation began in earnest in the 1960s, and it was driven as much by corporate strategy as by engineering. Raytheon had the Magnetron expertise. What it lacked was consumer appliance wisdom. It knew how to build machines that worked. It did not know how to build machines people wanted to live with. And so Raytheon made a move that would reshape the microwave's destiny. In 1965, it acquired Amana Refrigeration, a company rooted in Iowa that understood kitchens, aesthetics, user behavior, and the distribution networks of appliance retail. This acquisition was not merely a merger. It was a cultural translation. Raytheon brought the weapon. Amana brought the home. Together, they set out to solve the microwave's three great barriers: weight, plumbing, and price. The first hurdle was cooling. Early magnetrons produced intense waste heat. Water cooling was reliable, but impractical for homes. Engineers worked on improved magnetron designs, better materials, and airflow management. They added cooling fins, improved fans, and designed enclosures that could vent heat effectively. Air-cooled magnetrons became feasible, eliminating the need for plumbing. The second hurdle was power supply. Magnetrons require high voltage. Early units used heavy transformers and power components that added weight and cost. Improvements in efficiency and in power supply design allowed microwaves to run from standard household current. The box could be plugged into a wall outlet rather than wired like industrial equipment. The third hurdle was manufacturing scale and cost. As components improved and production methods matured, the price could come down. Still expensive, but no longer absurd. In 1967, Amana introduced the Radarange RR1, a countertop unit that looked like a real appliance. It was still heavy by modern standards at around 90 pounds, but it could sit on a counter. It was still expensive, at $495, but that price was in the realm of aspirational middle-class purchase, rather than institutional procurement. Most importantly, it could be marketed as a lifestyle tool, not a wartime relic. The marketing was precise. The 1960s were a period of social upheaval and shifting gender roles. More women were entering the workforce, but domestic expectations lagged behind. The microwave offered a narrative of liberation through time. It promised to make dinner possible, without hours of labor. It promised to preserve the ideal of home-cooked meals while reducing the burden of producing. Advertisements often depicted a polished, modern woman, sometimes in formal clothing, using the microwave as if it were effortless. The subtext was clear. You could embrace modern life and still be a provider. The machine would fill the gap between cultural expectations and personal reality. Amana also understood that new technology requires education. Early microwaves did not behave like ovens. Metal caused arcing. Foods heated unevenly. Timing was different. The company included cookbooks and instructions, teaching users how to adapt. It was not just about selling a box. It was about selling a new way of thinking about heat. Uneven cooking was another hurdle. Microwaves formed standing wave patterns inside the cavity, creating hot spots and cold spots. Early units could produce frustrating results. Amana introduced a stir fan, a metal blade that reflected microwaves in varying directions, helping distribute energy more evenly. Later, turntables became common, rotating food through the field to reduce unevenness. These were simple, mechanical solutions to a complex wave problem, and they were crucial to making the microwave feel reliable. Still, even with these improvements, microwaves in the late 1960s and early 70s were not yet universal. They were symbols of modernity, but adoption was limited. The price remained high. Many households still viewed them as unnecessary luxuries. The microwave needed a partner industry, something that would turn its unique strengths into everyday demand. That partner was the frozen food industry. Frozen foods existed long before microwaves. Clarence Bird's-eye's innovations in quick freezing in the early 20th century had made frozen vegetables and fish feasible. Postwar America embraced convenience foods. Supermarkets expanded. Refrigerators became larger. Freezers became common. The idea of storing food for later use fit a culture increasingly organized around schedules and suburban routine. But frozen foods had a problem: preparation time. Many frozen meals required oven baking for 30 to 60 minutes. That negated the promise of convenience, especially for working families. The microwave, with its ability to heat quickly and directly, could unlock frozen food's potential. And frozen food, with its standardized portions and packaging, could make microwaves feel necessary rather than optional. In the 1970s, this relationship matured. Food companies began designing products specifically for microwave heating. Packaging changed. Materials had to be microwave safe. Instructions had to account for power variability. Recipes had to adapt to microwave behavior, moisture retention, uneven feels, lack of browning. This is where a subtle but powerful shift occurred. The microwave did not just heat food faster, it reshaped the food itself. Meals were engineered for the machine. Texture, sauce viscosity, portion shape, and ingredients were designed to compensate for microwave limitations. Microwave dinners emerged as a category, not merely frozen meals that could be microwaved, but meals that were imagined from the beginning as microwave meals. The tray divided into compartments, each with different heating behavior. The instructions that told you to peel back a corner, stir halfway through, let stand. Standing time became a ritual, a moment where residual heat equalized. The microwave introduced a new kind of cooking choreography, a dance between machine timing and food physics. Economically, this partnership was explosive. Microwaves drove demand for convenience foods. Convenience foods drove demand for microwaves. It was a feedback loop, each industry benefiting from the other's growth. As prices dropped and production increased, microwaves moved from novelty to necessity. By the late 1970s, microwaves were no longer rare. They were increasingly present in middle-class homes, but they still had a usability problem: the interface. Early microwaves used mechanical timers, a dial that ticked like a kitchen timer, and these were imprecise. It was hard to set 15 seconds accurately. The limitation was not trivial. Microwave cooking is fast. 5 seconds can matter. The mechanical dial made microwaves feel less like precise instruments and more like crude heaters. The 1980s changed that. The Silicon Revolution reached the kitchen. Microprocessors became cheap enough to embed in appliances. The microwave became one of the first everyday household devices to gain a digital brain. With microprocessors came digital timers and power control. Instead of guessing, you could input exact seconds. You could program multiple stages, defrost at reduced power, then cook at full power. The microwave could behave less like a simple on-off box and more like a controllable system. Touchpads arrived, those membrane panels that felt futuristic in the early 80s. They also solved a practical problem. Knobs and dials are hard to clean. Touchpads could be wiped. They matched the sleek aesthetic of the decade. Preset buttons were not just marketing gimmicks. They represented a new idea: cooking as algorithm. The popcorn button, the reheat button, the beverage button. Behind each one was a set of assumptions about food mass, moisture content, and desired outcome. Engineers ran tests, collecting data, refining time and power curves. This was early consumer algorithmic cooking, long before smart kitchens and cloud connectivity. Sensors deepened that trend. Steam sensors could detect humidity changes in the oven cavity. As food heated, it released steam. By measuring steam levels, the microwave could estimate doneness and adjust time. This reduced user guesswork. It also shifted responsibility from the cook to the machine. The microwave became less a tool and more a semi-autonomous appliance. Visually, the microwave became a status object. Faux wood grain panels, bright LED displays, larger footprints. It often served as the kitchen clock. The machine did not just cook. It marked time. It told you the hour. It anchored the room. Adoption accelerated. By the mid-1980s, microwaves were spreading rapidly. Within a few years, they became one of the fastest adopted appliances in history. This wasn't just about technology. It was about cultural readiness. Households were becoming more time-pressed. Dual-income families became more common. After-school schedules, commutes, and fragmented routines made traditional meal preparation harder. The microwave offered a solution that felt like modern efficiency rather than compromise. But efficiency always has consequences. As microwaves became ubiquitous, they began to reshape behavior. Not in dramatic ways that people noticed immediately, but in subtle patterns that accumulated over years until they became norm. The traditional family meal, especially in many cultures, is a synchronized ritual. Food is prepared in bulk and eaten together at a designated time. This ritual is tied to the physics of cooking. Ovens take time. Stoves require attention. The meal becomes a shared event because the process demands coordination. The microwave broke that physical constraint. It enabled individualized heating, one portion at a time, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Suddenly, the schedule of the meal was no longer dictated by the oven. It could be dictated by the individual. This led to what sociologists described as the atomization of the meal. Family members eating at different times. A father heating a burrito after work. A teenager heating pizza bites between homework and television. A parent eating a diet meal later at night. The microwave made it possible to live together while eating apart. This shift is easy to romanticize as cultural decline, the loss of communal tradition. But it is also a pragmatic adaptation. In a time when schedules were increasingly fragmented, the microwave allowed households to function. It offered a way to provide hot food without requiring everyone to be present simultaneously. It offered flexibility. It reduced conflict over dinner timing. It became a quiet enabler of modern time management. The microwave also altered childhood independence. Before microwaves, cooking was dangerous for children. Open flames, hot coils, pots of boiling water. A child home alone, the latchkey kid of the 70s and 80s, was often limited to cold foods, cereal, sandwiches, snacks. The microwave changed the risk profile. It had no open flame. The exterior stayed relatively cool. It could be perceived as safe. That perception, accurate enough compared to stovetops, gave children access to hot food. An entire industry of kid-friendly microwave foods emerged. Portion-sized, easy, sweetened, designed for small hands and short attention spans. This development had social implications. It shifted responsibility for feeding from parent to child in certain contexts. It created a new form of self-service nutrition. It also aligned with a broader cultural move toward individualized consumption. Each person could choose and heat their own meal. The microwave changed hunger itself. Before microwaves, hunger demanded patience. If you wanted a baked potato, you planned an hour ahead. If you wanted roasted chicken, you planned even more. Hunger was managed by anticipation. There were rituals of waiting, setting the table, conversation, the slow build-up to eating. The microwave reduced waiting dramatically. It encouraged instant gratification. When the barrier between desire and fulfillment shrinks, behavior changes. People snack more often. They eat in smaller, more frequent bursts. They treat food as fuel that can be accessed immediately rather than as an event that must be organized. This convenience came with a cultural backlash. By the late 1990s, microwaves were often blamed for the rise of processed foods and obesity. The logic was seductive. Microwaves make it easy to heat packaged meals. Packaged meals are often high in sodium, sugar, and fat. Therefore, microwaves are part of the problem. But that framing misses complexity. The microwave is a tool. It can heat frozen pizza, but it can also steam vegetables quickly without leaching nutrients into boiling water. It can reheat leftovers, reducing waste. It can make it possible for elderly or disabled people to eat hot meals without physical strain. It can help people in small apartments or food deserts where full kitchens are not available. The same box that supports bad habits can also support survival. This is the recurring theme of the microwave story. It is a technology born for war, repurposed for peace, and then entangled with the messy reality of human behavior. It does not impose one outcome. It amplifies the patterns already present in a society. Technologically, the microwave continued to evolve. The fundamental magnetron remained, but power delivery improved. For decades, microwaves controlled power by cycling the magnetron on and off. At 50% power, the magnetron would run full blast for a period, then shut off. This produced uneven heating and the familiar phenomenon of food that is hot at the edges and cold at the center. Inverter technology addressed this. Instead of using a heavy transformer and simple cycling, inverter-based microwaves used solid-state electronics to provide continuous, variable power. At 50% power, the magnetron could run steadily at lower output rather than pulsing. This allowed gentler cooking, better defrosting, more delicate tasks like melting chocolate without scorching or seizing, warming sauces without breaking them, and heating foods more evenly. As consumer electronics advanced, microwaves also began to merge with other cooking methods. Convection microwave hybrids combined microwave heating with convection fans and heating elements, enabling browning and crisping. This was an attempt to solve the Maillard problem, to restore the sensory satisfaction of traditional cooking while preserving speed. In parallel, the smart home era introduced connectivity. Some microwaves gained sensors, cameras, and Wi-Fi. Barcodes on packaged foods could be scanned, and cooking instructions sent automatically. The promise was reduced user error and optimized results. The reality, as with many smart appliances, was mixed. Connectivity can add convenience, but it can also add complexity and maintenance burdens. Yet the trend reflects the broader trajectory of modern technology. Automation creeping into mundane ritual. Alongside technological evolution, myths persisted. The microwave remained misunderstood in public imagination. Even decades after it became common, people feared it in ways they did not fear ovens or stoves. One myth is that microwaves destroy nutrients. In reality, nutrient loss is often driven by heat, time, and water. Microwaving can be relatively gentle because it is fast and often uses little water. Boiling vegetables can leach water-soluble vitamins into the cooking water, which is then discarded. Microwaving can retain those nutrients because less water is used and cooking time is short. Another myth is that microwaves make food radioactive. This is a misunderstanding of radiation as a concept. Microwaves are non-ionizing electromagnetic waves. They do not alter atomic nuclei. They do not leave residual radiation in food. When the magnetron turns off, the microwaves cease. There is no lingering energy stored in the meal. The food is heated, not transformed into a radioactive source. These misunderstandings are rooted in the cultural trauma of the atomic age. The 20th century taught the public that invisible forces can be deadly. That lesson was true, but it was not nuanced. The word radiation became a symbol of danger, regardless of type or context. The microwave, by using radiation in a benign way, inherited that anxiety. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the microwave story is not the myths or the convenience, but the symbolism. This is a device born from the need to detect enemies in darkness, transformed into a tool for feeding families. It is a perfect example of how technologies migrate, how military research becomes consumer infrastructure, how wartime urgency accelerates innovation that later reshapes civilian life. The cavity Magnetron, that copper block carved into the Birmingham basement, was created to spot aircraft and submarines. It was meant to save cities from bombing. The waves it produced were meant to bounce off metal and return as echoes. But those waves did something else. They interacted with matter. They excited molecules. They produced heat. The same invisible energy that guided fighters to bombers could also warm a meal. That duality carries a deeper lesson about invention. Most technologies do not arrive with a single destiny. They arrive as capabilities. They are shaped by context. Radar created microwaves. Microwaves created cooking. Cooking created new food industries. Those industries shaped diets. Diets shaped health outcomes. Health outcomes shaped cultural debates. All from a copper block in a basement and an orphan engineer who noticed a melted candy. Percy Spencer's role in this story deserves careful attention, not because he was alone, but because he embodied a kind of attention that makes discovery possible. His moment was not simply luck. Many people have had candy bars melt and shrugged. Spencer's mind was trained by years of self-education and hands-on engineering to treat anomalies as clues. His curiosity was disciplined. He did not just wonder, he tested. He moved from observation to experiment to patent. Spencer's story is also a reminder of the hidden labor behind consumer products. The microwave did not become common simply because someone discovered it could cook. It became common because thousands of engineers improved magnetrons, reduced costs, designed safe enclosures, created user manuals, developed packaging materials, wrote recipes, built supply chains, and persuaded the public to trust a box that used invisible waves. The microwave also demonstrates the economic logic of modern life. The rise of microwaves aligns with the rise of time scarcity. As labor patterns shifted, as commutes lengthened, as dual-income households became normal, time became more valuable. The microwave offered time back, not in grand gestures, but in small daily savings that accumulate. 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, in aggregate, hours per week. But time saved is not always time reclaimed. Sometimes it is time reallocated. The microwave did not necessarily create leisure. It often supported more work, more scheduling, more multitasking. It enabled people to fit meals into tighter days, which could be liberating or exhausting depending on perspective. The microwave is part of a larger story of modern acceleration, where technology reduces friction and society responds by increasing speed. There is also an environmental dimension. Microwaves can be energy efficient for small heating tasks because they directly heat food rather than heating air and oven walls. Reheating leftovers in a microwave may use less energy than heating a full oven. But the microwave's partnership with packaged convenience foods increased demand for plastics, trays, and disposable packaging. It supported an economy of single-serve portions, which has its own waste profile. Culturally, the microwave became a symbol in both positive and negative ways. It symbolized modernity, efficiency, and technological mastery. It also symbolized cheapness, processed food, and the decline of cooking skills. In fiction, microwaves became props for hurried lives, lonely dinners, and late-night routines. The microwave beep became the sound of modern domestic solitude, a tiny chime in a quiet kitchen when everyone else is asleep. And yet, the microwave also became a symbol of care. A parent reheating soup for a sick child, a student warming instant noodles in a dorm, a nurse heating a meal during a night shift, a caregiver making food accessible to someone who cannot cook safely. The same machine can represent both alienation and support, depending on the story you tell. Global adoption varied. In some countries, microwaves became ubiquitous quickly. In others, cultural cooking practices relied less on ovens and more on stovetops, making the microwave less central. Yet even where microwaves were not primary cooking tools, they often became common for reheating convenience. The technology spread because it answered a universal need: quick heat. The microwave's future is still evolving. There are experiments with solid-state radio frequency cooking, which could offer more precise control over frequency and field patterns, potentially reducing hotspots and enabling new cooking textures. There are efforts to integrate more sensors, to identify food types automatically, to adjust power dynamically. There are designs that combine steam, convection, and microwave energy for better results. But regardless of the future, the core story remains. The microwave is a case study in how war shapes peace, how secret research becomes everyday normality, how an invisible wave, once used to hunt bombers, becomes a tool that warms coffee and melts butter. It is also, in a strange way, a story about perception. Radar was an invisible eye, a way to perceive the enemy beyond human senses. The microwave oven is a way to manipulate matter beyond human senses, to heat from within without flame or glowing coils. Both are about mastering the invisible. Both are about turning abstract physics into practical advantage. And that is the deeper cultural phenomenon here. The 20th century did not just invent new machines, it invented a new relationship to the unseen. It taught people to trust systems they cannot perceive directly, to trust electricity, radio, radiation, data, algorithms. The microwave is one of the most intimate examples because it sits in the home. It asks you to believe that invisible waves will cook your food safely, and it asks you to accept that the process will not look like cooking in the traditional sense. No flames, no browning, no aroma until the end. Just a quiet hum and heat appearing as if by magic. The early marketers leaned into that magic, sometimes literally calling the microwave a magic box. But the true magic is not mystery. It is understanding. It is the translation of complex physics into a simple button. In the Birmingham basement, the Magnetron was built to win a war. In Raytheon's labs, it became a curiosity that melted chocolate. In Amana's factories, it became a consumer product. In supermarkets, it reshaped food. In kitchens, it reshaped routines. And in culture, it reshaped the meaning of cooking, time, and domestic life. The microwave oven is sometimes treated as mundane, almost invisible in its familiarity. But if you trace its lineage, it becomes one of the most extraordinary objects in modern life, A wartime secret turned into a household staple, a device that embodies the 20th century's defining pattern. The migration of advanced technology into everyday spaces until the extraordinary becomes ordinary. And perhaps that is the final irony. The microwave began as a way to see danger coming through the dark. It became a way to make a meal in the dark, when the day is too long and time is too short, and the kitchen is quiet except for the hum of invisible waves doing their work. The next time you hear that familiar ding, remember that you're listening to the echo of a technology that once saved the world. Percy Spencer didn't just invent a faster way to cook. He changed the tempo of human life. Did the communal table die with the microwave, or did it just evolve? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into tech history, hit the like button and subscribe for our next chronicle. Until then, stay curious.